My guests today opened the Santa Fe Symphony Orchestra and Choruses season this weekend. Violinists Elmar Oliveira and Sirena Huang and conductor Guillermo Figueroa. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Elmar Oliveira, you just founded a violin concerto. Now, you won the I think, if I'm right, you were the only violinist ever to win the Tchaikovsky competition. Is that right?
No, I'm the only American violinist to win the Tchaikovsky competition. That was in 1978.
Which must have been a lot of pressure. So with all the pressure from that, who in their right mind would found a competition for other violinists, and why?
Well, there are lots of reasons for that to happen. First of all, in 1978, I won the Tchaikovsky, the gold medal at the Tchaikovsky competition. And basically, my career at that point was propelled into an enormous ordeal. I was getting calls in the middle of the night and to appear with this orchestra and that orchestra, this recital series, etc. And I accepted as many of them as I could. And fortunately, the thing about winning a competition is the re-engagements are very important. So fortunately, I played well enough when I first went to these orchestras that I was re-engaged to appear with them again.
So it's not really about the prize money so much as it is about the stature and about getting introduced to other organizations so you can have a career.
Well, definitely with the Tchaikovsky competition, it was not at all about the prize money. Because, you know, we were paid in rubles, which were like at that point, rubles were nothing. They were worthless.
So you spent them before you left the country.
Well, I remember that I opened a bank account and I kept the rubles there. And then finally, when I went back to play, I gave the rubles to my interpreter who was getting married to his new wife at that time. And they were both economists. And I said, well, you know, I mean, you can't really live in your parents' apartment. So here's the money. Come to the bank with me. Here's the money and get your own apartment. And that was a great thing for them. The reason why I started the Elmar Oliveira International Violin Competition is because in 1978, when I was given the opportunity to go to Moscow and to win the Tchaikovsky competition, it was such a great surprise to me as well, being there. And the opportunities that arose were enormous at that time. And I thought, well, this was great for me. I've had my career, and I decided that it was time to give to the young people who were starting their careers at this particular time. It was important for me to give back to the young people who are starting their careers. So that's basically why I started the Elmar Oliveira International Violin Competition.
Sirena Huang is the winner of the first ever Elmar Oliveira International Violin Competition. Stiff competition in this one?
Oh, well, it was definitely a challenging competition, of course, because everyone played very, very well, and lots of musicians there that I admire very much that played alongside with me in the competition. And I would say that because I've actually had the experience of entering a number of other competitions before, and it's actually quite rare to find a competition that puts building the winner's career as one of their highest priorities. I would say a lot of other competitions, which is also good in their own way, you know, they give a lot of cash prize or whatnot, and that's good in their own respect. But at the same time, there aren't that many competitions out there that really try to build a career for the winner and to really support them and to know what happens to them after they win the competition. And so I'm really, really grateful for this EOI VC competition that I entered, because through that I've gotten incredible support in terms of career, but also, like, you know, as a musician. And it's just it's rare to find that these days, and that's what really stood out to me entering this competition that was really quite different from the other ones I've experienced.
Elmar, were you also one of the judges?
No, I was not one of the judges.
Excellent.
In fact, that's one of the great things about this competition is that not only did I recuse myself from the competition, from judging the competition, but I, of course, pick the judges because I know so many people around the world, and I pick the repertoire. But outside of that, I have no dealings with the competition whatsoever. And the great thing about it is that all of the judges that were on my jury also had to recuse themselves if they had students that were playing in the competition. And they all did.
Excellent. So it's an impartial
So it's a very
panel of
impartial
judges.
thing. Very impartial thing. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat on juries at competitions where the students' teachers can vote for their own students. And it happens all the time.
So, Sirena, coming to the Santa Fe Symphony for the first time, I believe.
Right.
Now, you two are playing together. You're playing the Bach double
Yes.
concerto. From the Baroque era, which was where the concertos were first being invented by Bach and Vivaldi. This is an interesting concerto in that it has the two instruments that speak to each other in addition to the orchestra. Can you tell me a little bit about the way...
Should I do that?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that between 1717 and 1723, before Bach went to Leipzig, he was Kapellmeister in Köthen, Germany. And, this is a really favorite piece among violinists in particular. But it was also Bach himself transcribed it for two harpsichords. And this piece has been played even in a jazz idiom. I remember Stefan Grappelli played this piece, in a jazz idiom along with, I think, Sven Dasmussen.
Which Bach probably would have loved because
of course he would have loved it.
transcribed
Of course
his
he would
music
have
for
loved
other.
it. I mean, it's basically anything that Bach ever wrote can be played in any style that you really want.
But
it
being
to
a
be
fan
played.
of the violin, I think it works best for two
Well, I
violins,
think
frankly.
so. I think so too. Because of course we have the violin is very close to the voice, or at least should be. And this is one of the great things that we have that we're able to do with this Bach double violin concerto is we can simulate what the human voice really sounds like.
So it's really a conversation between two voices with each other and an orchestra.
Absolutely. Particularly the second movement, which is one of the most beautiful movements ever written, And, we never got a complete score of the Bach double because when it was copied by Johann Christian Bach, and he just copied various sections of it. That's basically all that exists. We don't really have, and a lot of Bach's works were copied by Anna Magdalena and by other copyists, and we don't really, we think we know what from an original score what Bach's intentions were, but we don't really know. I mean, we think we know, but we don't really know.
And then we move into the 20th century with the Concerto for Samuel Barber, which, Sirena, you're playing. There were great romantic concertos, probably the three that everybody thinks of most, the Brahms, the Beethoven, and the Tchaikovsky. 20th century comes along, and Samuel Barber writes this concerto that immediately goes into the standard repertoire because it's so beloved. So what did he do right?
Oh, wow. Many, many things. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what, but I would say that something that always stands out to me about this particular piece is the sonority and the sound that Barber gets from the orchestra and the soloist, that it almost seems like chamber music at all times. And it's not, it's not like, for example, like a Paganini concerto where it's like a solo musician in the front and then we have an accompaniment in the back. I mean, it's really when you hear this live, it's really like it's the entire orchestra and a violinist in the front playing this incredible work together. There's no, the soloist versus orchestra, and because of that, it creates this wonderful sound quality that you don't really hear from many other concertos. So I would say that it's the atmosphere and the sound quality that Barber gets, and all the harmonies that really distinguishes this piece from others. And of course, again, there's the last movement is unique in its own way because it's a perpetual motion that is very virtuosic, and I don't think there are many other last movements in concertos that are quite composed in that sense.
And the standard concerto format is fast, slow, fast, and Barber goes away from that altogether. The first two movements are meditative and melodic, and then this last movement almost comes out of nowhere. Right.
And I would say the first two movements seem almost it's almost scenic in terms of the way the music sounds, and then the third movement is really like just straight up violin virtuosity.
Now, yeah. Barber also wrote for the voice. He wrote opera and he wrote songs. Is part of why this concerto works so well because he wrote it like it was? It's
very vocal, and kind of like what Elmar was talking about, how violin is very close to the voice. You hear that so much in this violin concerto in a way that I guess you could tie Bach and Barber together in the sense that they both saw violin as an instrument that was so similar to voice, and it's interesting actually to see how they expressed it a little bit differently, but at the same time there's some similarities as well. Yeah.
Would you mind playing something for us?
Sure, absolutely.
Sirena Huang, thank you. What did you just play?
I just played the Andante from the second sonata in A minor by Bach. I thought in the spirit of Bach it would be fitting to play one of my favorite movements from his solo sonatas. And in this piece, I think it's very apparent how you can hear the voice line it move in very melodic in its own way, and accompanied by a very beautiful bass line, which I think you can hear that in the Bach double violin concerto as well.
And Sirena plays with the Santa Fe Symphony this weekend. Guillermo Figueroa conducts. Guillermo, the finale of the program is the last piece for orchestra that Tchaikovsky wrote. The symphony that's called the Pathétique, but that's a misnomer.
Of course, it was not given by him, but rather suggested by his brother. And he wanted to call it the Passionata Symphony or something like that. And that's what the title really refers to. When we think pathétique, we think of something weak and feeble, and that's so far away removed from what the symphony actually is. It was actually he thought it was the best thing that he had ever composed.
And he started composing it, I think, on his way to America. He threw away his first try at it and tore it up, and then worked again. So this really was a labor of love for him.
Yeah, and it's a very progressive symphony in many ways, although many of the trademarks of Tchaikovsky are there, the brilliant orchestration and the powerful climaxes and the soaring melodies. But he adopted this scheme where what you would think would be the last movement is actually not the last, but slow movement rather is. So the symphony ends in a very different way than symphonies were supposed to end at that time. So he reverses the pattern, which was a very unusual thing to do, which actually got him a lot of criticism because there was good reaction to the symphony, but people couldn't understand why he had done that. But it's a very curious thing because it's almost as an acceptance of fate kind of ending. I don't think it's morbid. I think it's rather very knowing. He was very knowing about his own destiny and his fate, and he was portraying that in the symphony. Another very progressive touch is that the melody that opens the final movement, he does a very curious thing. You hear a melody, but each note is split between different instruments of the strings, but the ear perceives it as one line, which is as advanced as can possibly be. We're thinking Schoenberg and Berg, which carried forward that idea, a lot of splitting melodies in different registers. And here we find it in Tchaikovsky. So he was really forward-thinking and justifiably proud of his achievement.
I think I read that even in the Soviet era, some Russian symphonies went ahead and reversed the last movement so they could have a climax at the end of the piece rather than in the middle.
Yeah, because, of course, in the Soviet era, you had to be all positive and all that stuff. But no, it's perfect the way it is. There's no way you could change it.
And you said Tchaikovsky is a master of instrumentation, but he's also, I think, a master of a way of expressing emotion with an orchestra that almost no other composer touches.
No, it's very unique. Yes, of course, Brahms and Mahler are very passionate composers, but the emotions of Tchaikovsky are raw and right on the surface, pretty much identifiable and receivable by anybody. You don't have to dig very deep to feel the power of what he's doing. And what I like about Tchaikovsky is that he's much more classical, actually, than a lot of people give him credit to. His structures are very organized, very formal. In fact, when you do analysis of the structure of his phrases, they are very regular. 8-bar phrases followed by 8-bar phrases, whereas somebody like Mozart, whom we think of as this little clockwork kind of music, is completely irregular in his phrase structure. So it's very, very amazing to think of that, of Tchaikovsky.
So is it a temptation almost to sort of overdo the rubato and the emotionalism when you're conducting it? Is it a matter of discipline to really, really
You
keep
need
it
a
tight?
lot of discipline, and you need to, more than in any composer, you really need to stick to his markings because they're very detailed. His metronome markings are very clear as to what he wants, how he wants the melodies to flow. And if you deviate from that, you really risk running into sentimentalism, which is not at all what he wanted.
Even though Tchaikovsky conducted the premiere of the work 9 days before he died. But again, it goes back to I think the misnomer of the symphony. It's not pathetique. It's emotional.
It's emotional, correct. Passionate. Passionate would be the word to describe it.
Guillermo Figueroa conducts the Santa Fe Symphony Orchestra this weekend. The Bach Double Concerto featuring Elmar Oliveira and Sirena Huang. Huang plays Barber's Violin Concerto, and the concert concludes with that beautiful Symphony No. 6 by Tchaikovsky. Tickets available at the Santa Fe Symphony box office, 983-1414, at the Lensic, 988-1234, online at santafesymphony.org. Thank you all for coming, and what a great concert we're looking forward to this weekend.
Thanks for having us.